8 hours, guys.
Yeah, I think my wife would not be happy with my 8 hours. All right. Well, we're recording now. We don't have to get started now, but anytime we want to from here on, we will already be recording.
Good deal.
Um,
Well,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I mean, Craig, do you have any questions about the flow or process? I mean, we've got. Do you have the Google document with everything in there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we pretty much try to flow through this. Like, this is kind of our framework for how the discussion is going to go. I mean, sometimes we go a little off script or we tell extra stories or things like that, and that's fine. But this is just kind of help us know where we're going and what to say. And I have on there, we do every week a parenting fail segment at the beginning and then a parenting win. You're more than welcome to throw something in there if you'd like, but don't feel like you have to.
All right. Great. I'm just going to basically follow your leads on where this goes and what you need from me.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay, great.
I'll follow your lead, Matt.
Very good. Well, Bevel, you are the one in charge today. You're going to be our moderator and host, so I'll just leave it to you.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I guess we could just get started.
Oh, and I do want you guys to know that I still am going to edit this episode. So I'm going to pull it down. It's going to record it. I'm going to pull it down, edit it, and then put all of our stuff in. So don't feel pressured to have to be perfect for just this recording.
Okay. Sounds good.
So, yeah.
Sweet. Well, we'll get started.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Parent Pastor Podcast, where we talk about the struggle to live out our calling to be a parent to our children first and a pastor to our congregation second. I'm Jonathan Bevel. I'm in North Little Rock, Arkansas, serving Lakewood United Methodist Church. I've got a beautiful wife and 2 gorgeous daughters.
I'm Matt Stout. I live in Brunswick, Georgia, and I also have a beautiful wife, 2 gorgeous daughters, and a bouncing baby boy.
Oh, yeah.
I'm Manderson, and I live in suburban Cleveland, Ohio. I serve North Royalton United Methodist Church, and I have a beautiful wife as well and 2 strapping young boys.
Who are amazing warriors, or at least we're going to try and train them up that way, right?
That's right. That's right.
Well, this week we're discussing having a healthy perspective of other people, and we're excited to have a guest. I just want to introduce Craig Gillum as our guest, and I don't know if I've ever told you this, Craig, but they always have this saying that distance makes the heart grow fonder. I've come to realize just how much your ministry has impacted my life and my ministry, and just how being in Arkansas now, away from Louisiana, and out of the whole Board of Ordained Ministry process down there, just how much I've missed you and just how much I've gleaned from you. So first, thank you, and I'll just let you introduce yourself if you'd like.
Sure. Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate the time. Yeah, I'm married, I have 2 sons. Both of them are grown out of the nest. We're empty nesters, which was quite an adjustment in and of itself. For years they said yes sir to me. Now I say yes sir to them because both of them are bigger than I am. It's probably in a lot better shape as well. So anyway, in my roles, I wear numerous hats as far as ministry. I did serve in a local parish. Now I'm the director for the Center for Pastoral Excellence of the Louisiana Conference. I also am on staff with Just Peace. Just Peace has its office in Washington, D.C. It's a United Methodist resource. And I'm on staff there as well. Also adjunct faculty at Perkins School of Theology. And then I do whatever else comes down the pipe that I need to do or other hat I need to wear. So
it's a lot of hats.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah. And if I get confused on my hats, please remind me of which one I need to be wearing.
Well, Craig, I don't know what these guys think, but I just, certainly you've been a mentor to me, and I've learned a lot from you, and I'm excited about our topic today. But I would say you could just have the hat friend on today if you'd like.
That sounds great.
Good deal.
Sounds like.
Well, one last thing before we get started, I wanted to say, you are an extremely patient person. If anything, to have to put up with me, Alan Johnson, and Chad Brooks, but that's a story for a whole nother time.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to go ahead and jump into it. Let's go. And then we'll play our theme song here later on. Yeah, so.
Right.
Well, before we jump into our topic, we just wanted to address something that came up from our Facebook page and just say that we are grateful for the community that has formed there and other places, and just really that you're engaging and that you're writing to us. This past week, Catherine Heinz called us out on something that I think is important. I shared a post about this article that said the typical pastor's wife is dead. And she said, I know it's just a general thing and the person that's speaking is a wife, but, we need to be careful about using terms correctly here and that we should be using the term spouse. And Manderson has led the way in using that. And Catherine, I'm so grateful for you and for your ministry and just for bringing that up because, we want this community to be not just for, white male pastors like ourselves, and we've really been looking for different folks with different perspectives to be on the show, and so that's going to be coming down the pipeline. But we're grateful for you just encouraging us to become better people and to get better at what we do. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, Catherine, we're really thankful that you continually put that in front of us, and we are working. We haven't really talked about that on the show, but we are working behind the scenes to gather different perspectives, and we value that because we know that we are the status quo in our profession, specifically in the United Methodist, but we want to hear different perspectives, and with that, we want to know and hear from you, whether that's on our Facebook group or wherever you can connect with us. We have multiple ways. If you are someone that is non-traditional, if you are a single parent, if you are a pastor's spouse and you listen to our show, if you are whatever you are, we want to join in this community and have people share with us. And we're new at this parenting thing, and so we are here to learn more than we are here to speak into this. And so I want to just invite you to be a part of that.
Yeah, to the extent to which we've contributed to that problem, we're sorry. I know we had an episode where we interviewed our wives, and so we kind of tended towards the pastor's wife thing with that because we were talking to our wives, but that's no excuse for excluding other people. So we're sorry for the extent to which we have contributed to this problem on our show already. And we're just trying to learn, trying to grow, and we want to do better. So thanks for continuing to engage with us, and thanks for bringing that stuff up because we appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. We are indeed sorry and looking forward to continuing to learn more about you and ourselves and really how we need to see people, kind of what we're talking about this week. Well, we're going to do our parenting fails for the week, and I'll kind of kick it off. So I've been out of town all week, and so this is stuff from really last weekend, but I realized that with Emma, she's 2.5, and she still sounds like the kid off of Monsters, Inc., and so there's times where she just says things, and it's hard to dialogue with her, and a lot of times, I've said this before, like, if there's anything you don't want her to be in, she's there in it already. Like, no, stop running with the scissors, Emma, put it down. So I think, and I don't even remember what it was, but there was something she got into last week, and I was like, no, Emma, and lately I have been convicted by how I interact with her because as soon as I say that, she knows she's done wrong and stuff like that, but I think I just kind of, almost in a way, break her little spirit, and I hate that I do that. Like, she will hang her head down and just start kind of doing the puckered bottom lip out, and then start crying, and I just kind of, I melt. And so what I'm needing to learn here is how to explain why and being patient with her, and maybe dropping the level at which I use my voice and just saying, Emma, we don't do this or that. So that's my fail for the week. What about you guys?
Oh my gosh, I got a huge fail this week. So last Saturday, I was eating a slice of pizza and have a tooth that I've been having problems with, and I just felt like this crunch. And I broke my tooth. It was awful.
Oh,
and I couldn't get into the dentist that whole weekend. And so Monday morning, I go at 8 a.m. As soon as they open, I go to the dentist. I walk up, I hand them my insurance card, and the lady was like, "You don't have." They say you don't have insurance. I'm like, "What? I pay for it every month." Well, there's a long story behind that. What happened was that my debit card expired, and so that automatic payment stopped. And so rather than saying, "Hey, bro, your debit card expired. What's the new number?" They said, "No insurance for you." And so I went home without getting my tooth fixed. And on my way home in the car, I called the insurance company, and they were giving me the runaround. And I was getting so angry because my tooth hurt, and it's just embarrassing to show up and then be like, "No, you're not insured." And so I got home, and Sarah Beth was like, "What happened? What's going on?" And I lost it. Not at her. This wasn't directed at her. It was directed at the insurance company. But I was still like, "Thank God for my insurance!" I mean, it was Batman voice times 10. And I was like slamming doors, and I was like, "They called them, and they said that we didn't have it. They said the debit card expired." And I was like, kicked this little toy around, and I was like, just going off. I was so angry. And if I keep talking about it now, I'm going to keep getting angry again. But then Sarah Beth was like, "Man, calm down." And I looked, and Ruthie was like, and Olivia were hiding in the bathroom scared. And I was like, "Oh, no. I scared my kids with my anger outburst." And that doesn't typically happen with me. I'm not typically that genuinely angry of a person. It just, man, it got me worked up. And so I felt so bad that my kids, for that moment, felt like they were unsafe for that. And then Ruthie later was like, "Daddy did a bad thing." Daddy got mad, and he was bad, and he didn't control his temper. And I was like, "That's right, honey, I'm sorry." And she was just kind of like chastising me later. I don't think it permanently scarred them or anything, but it may have permanently scarred me, because that's not how I want my kids to see me.
Yeah, well, this week, Bevel and I were actually away at a conference together, and we shared some things about that, which was really awesome. I really, really enjoyed the time that we had together, and we missed Matt Stout a lot. And
my jealousy is real high right now.
We had a great time, but I was away all last week. Pretty much. I had something almost every single night, and even this morning, we're taping here on Saturday morning. I had something to be away from the house this morning, so I have been away from my family basically since Monday of the beginning of this week, and I've just been feeling this guilt that I haven't been spending enough time with our family, and it's just an internal guilt. It's not anything that's been communicated from anybody else. But it's real. But so I don't think it's a fail, because my wife has been supportive throughout this whole week and say, "You need to go to this conference. You need to you need to recharge," and all these things like that. But this innate sense of guilt that I've had, I don't want to have it, because I know that there's some things that I have to do as a pastor of a church, and some things I need to do as a father. But I just feel like I dropped the ball this week, and I didn't. It's just this innate sense of my own failure to be around, and it's just 1 week out of 52 that it is like this. But I feel bad about it.
Well, I want to encourage you, Manderson, because you are a good father, and you're there, and so. If anything, don't beat yourself up, and listen to. Your wife knows. And she knows she can speak to that, and so the truth is that you don't have to feel guilty. It's good.
Yeah, and that was something that we can talk about later on. But from the conference, I garnered that from one of their senior leadership there. We are at Ginghamsburg Church outside of Dayton, but I spoke to her, and I'm trying to get her on the podcast at some point. But she spoke into me at that moment too, and I kind of released that guilt, but I felt it. And I felt it this morning when I had to leave early too. So
yeah.
Well,
thanks for being on the podcast.
Yeah. Well, Craig, do you have any? I know your kids are out of the house. Do you have a parenting fail? If not, it's cool.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. A little different story, very brief, but it's a different one. There was an awareness for my wife and I. Our sons, like I said, both of them are grown and gone. Not too long ago, though, we had a conversation with them. And it was rather surprising because it was one of those late flowering insights for us. Uh, when we talked about our ministry while they were young, growing up in the house, one of the things they said that they had the greatest challenge or difficulty around. We lived in New Orleans. And a lot of their growing up years, we were in uptown New Orleans. And I had a two large appointment. One was a very small congregation, and one was a very large one, for part of that time anyway. And we'd have on Christmas Eve, we'd have like a 6 o'clock service, and then I think I had to do a 7 o'clock service, then we had the midnight service.
Wow.
I was amazed that they said one of the things they regretted the most, I guess is the word, or made them the most anxious, is they said, "Dad, we always hated when you had to leave the house late at night to go to the midnight service." And this was when they were so young. We really didn't want them to be there. And we would put them to bed and didn't even really realize that they knew we were out of I was out of the house. Put them to bed, get for the next thing, and then I would leave. But I was aware. It made me aware how much more attentive our children are than we give them credit for. Mm-hmm. They're good observers, pick up on things, not even aware. And they were anxious because of my safety and their security, all being locked in the home versus me going out at night. And it really to me about the deep awareness that children have, so much more than we know, and in some ways they even know, and their ability to pick up on things. Yeah, but it was an insight and a moment for me.
Wow, that's definitely something for us to learn from. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, we're going to jump into our topic for this week, having a healthy perspective of other people, and I'd consider Craig a guru on this particular thing we're discussing, and it comes from Michael Buber. I always want to call him Michael Bublé, and I know that's not true, of course, but this is where my mind goes. And so it's called the I-it, I-thou perspective, and it's a way in which we see people, whether well, Craig, I'll let you kind of just give us an overview and talk a little bit about it.
Sure. And please, this is a conversation. So interrupt, ask questions, etc. But Buber, for me, was very insightful. I've done a lot of work in the area of family systems. And when I read Mark Buber, he really, in his material, gave me some insight that is very helpful in the way I monitor and regulate myself, my own interaction and perspective towards people. And one of his books that did that was his book, I Thou. It's a classical book. The first time I read it, it made no sense to me, and probably about the 9th or the 10th read, the light went on, and it really spoke volumes for me. What he's talking about is he says there's two fundamental ways to stand in life. Now he's talking about something deeper than just the way we function. He's talking about something deeper than just behavior. But he's really talking about a way of the heart or way of the soul, in our meta language. And he says there's fundamentally two ways to stand in life. It's in an I-it way, and there's an I-thou way. An I-thou way is a way that honors and respects the dignity of another. It is open and responsive to others' hope and dreams and fears and concerns. It really believes that their reality is as important as is our own. Therefore, I'm responsive to it. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I am responsive to it. Now, when I move over to the I-it stance in life, it means really that others' reality is not as important as my own.
Hmm.
Therefore, I'm resistant or I'm reactive to it. And really, this kind of dichotomy, it's really a continuum. We're always sliding up and down. How we stand towards life, how we react or respond towards others. Do we recognize and honor the other because they too are a person made in the image of God as much as I am? Or do I see that that might be true, but I have a little bit more of that image than they do? Do I see and honor that we really are, that we all have, that we are all made in the image of God? So how do we honor and respect that? And how do we find that image in them, invite them to find it within themselves and live out of that place? And so let me give you a couple of quick stories that illustrate that for me. And I'm sure you can think with your families. Way at times, you've seen your children in a kind of I-it way, or your spouse. And you can also probably think of those times. Oops, I'm sorry. I'm also certain you can think of those times when you saw your spouse in an I-thou way, and therefore responded to him that way, and he or she saw you in an I-thou way and responded to you. Here's a couple of stories for you that help illustrate that for me. One of the best, and part of the assumption of this whole stuff with I, thou, and I-it that I think is nice with Buber, that he's working at this level deeper than just behavior, and there's an assumption to it. And the assumption is that there's something deeper than just behavior that people, that our children, that our spouse senses, intuits, that is deeper than just behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's not right, it'll sabotage the most correct outward behavior almost every time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's something deeper than just behavior that people sense, that they intuit. When it's not right, it'll sabotage the most outwardly corrective behaviors almost every time.
I think we could name that as authenticity.
I think we can name it as authenticity.
I was reading.
Go
ahead. I was reading this book called The Anatomy of Peace that I was assigned for one of my classes, and it's really just a repackaging of Buber's ideas, especially as it relates to the workplace and families. But one of the things that they were saying there is that you could do the exact same action, the exact same behavior in an I-it way or an I-thou way, and people will know and they will respond differently. Like even if you have to, like fire an employee, if you fire an employee as if they're an object, that's different than you still having to fire them, still having to take that hard action, but doing it as with an I-thou perspective, and it matters.
Yes, right.
Yeah, and I think behind it, it's basically before you even are in the presence of that other person. I mean, it's not always this way, but you either decide whether you're for them or whether you're against them. You know, I had a time when I was in ministry at Louisiana Tech. I was a Wesley Foundation intern, and I had just found out something about someone else, and I really should have rescheduled my meeting with that person, but I just was not. I wasn't myself, and I think that's the point. Like, I just was not myself, and so when I met with this person, I mean, there was tension. And they sensed it, and looking back, I'm like, yeah, duh, it makes sense that that person wouldn't want to spend time with me. Probably should have cooled off. But it really is a sense of like, okay, is this person for me or against me? Do they even acknowledge that I mean something to them? You know, one of the ministers I worked with at my first appointment, J. Roddy Taylor, great man. I learned a lot from him, and he always had this question, which when I think about it, it like bugs me because it's awkward in the sense of most people don't talk this way, but I think it hits to what this means. And he'd always, as soon as he met someone or saw someone that he knew not well or well at all, or he knew really well, he'd say, "What's going on in your world?" And I think that was a way to say, I'm acknowledging that I've got my own stuff going on, but you've got stuff going on, and I really want to be a part of that and to kind of sense where you're at with your heart, with your spirit, even with your behavior before we interact. And it had just this, I don't want to say magical, but I mean just this great way of welcoming people into the relationship in a way that's very respecting and honoring that they're a person and that they matter to that other person too.
That's awesome.
That's great. Wow. Well, you know, and what I found intriguing about all this too is that it seems as if our capacity, our ability to hold that I-thou space and over against the I-it is in direct proportion to the level of anxiety in a space. When the anxiety is higher, the temptation for me to move to an I place very quickly becomes very magnified. So when we're going into a space of a lot of anxiety, whether it's our church families or our home families, you know, the temptation to move into the I-it place is so great and to objectify others. Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm a highly anxious person, and I noticed that because what do we do when that happens is that we close ourselves in and we want to protect ourselves, right? That it all turns internal to me, and so that makes the other person not as important as I am. I noticed that, and I think that's interesting that, you know, stress, right? Stress, wherever that may be in someone's life, causes me to think about me more than it causes me to think about somebody else. So it's just a thought with that.
Yeah, in a very
Go ahead, please.
Oh, I was going to say, in a very basic way, you know, thinking about our own kids as they're young and trying to teach them, like one of the main lessons we should learn, or hopefully we have learned, and maybe there's some adults that haven't, but the world does not revolve around us. We, you know, in our family, there's times where, like today, we saw a college buddy at a coffee shop for pancakes, and Sophie just kept interrupting, and that's something she's trying to learn, and, you know, trying to teach her, oh, Mr. Jacob's talking right now. Wait till he's done, and this and that. It's acknowledging, like, my world, what's going on is not everything.
Right.
You know, you've got your own stuff going on, and how do we have the conversation of, you know, making sure that our needs are met, making sure that we're learning about each other, that we have a level of wanting to understand each other better, and I don't know, just kind of moving forward together. And it does seem as though, and maybe you could speak a little to this, Craig, that our culture and our society has shifted in such a way where we are very individualistic and we are very me-focused, to where I mean, it just seems like we always, no matter where we go, what we do, we're always focused on me and what I need or what I want right now. And it has such a way of making the world less communal, less realizing that we are all created in the image of God. We all are connected in some way, and that we all can really learn something from the other person if we're open to that, if we have sort of this mindset, this perspective in place.
Well, and I know for me, like, when I get so focused on something, I tend to have a worse idea of my kids' behavior. Like, there have been times when I'm just sitting there at home, I'm like, the kids are being so horrible today. They're just all over the place. They're out of control. And then I think about it, I'm like, really? Is their behavior really that different from what it is on a day-to-day basis? And I realize, like, the person that has changed here isn't them. It's not that their behavior has gotten worse. It's that my perspective on their behavior has gotten worse. Because either I am up against a deadline and I'm trying to work and they're interrupting me, or because I, am tired and I would rather be resting or just vegging out than actually engaging with my kids in that moment. You know, it's like, what do I expect them to do? At that point, anything that they do, any sound that they make is annoying to me. And so that, to me, it presents itself as me thinking, man, they're being awful today. But when I'm honest about it, it's me that's different. It's me who has shifted this I-thou from me thinking them as a person to me thinking of them as little interruption machines or little, little drink spilling machines that are just spilling stuff all over the place. And anytime I start to shift into that I-it mode, my perception of their behavior gets so much worse. But it's not really them. The problem is me. And I need to be thinking of them as children that I love and not walking interruptions.
I can't tell you how many times like Missy has had to tell me like they're not behaving in this way just to upset you. Like they're just behaving, and it's kind of that reality that like the world does not revolve around Jonathan Bevel. Like my kids are just being kids. Something I think that'd be helpful would be just to kind of talk about like story, because sometimes we talk about these things and we're trying to understand, but stories really highlight our understanding of them and help us understand them. So one thing I wanted to share as we were thinking about this, I thought about it all week. I had pretty much the exact same situation happen before I learned this and after I learned this. And this was when I was serving in Monroe, Louisiana. And once a month, me and my friends that were on the ordination track, we'd visit with Craig, and we'd learn and process through more of all that he taught us. And so the situation was one morning I had to get to work early. My wife needed to get to somewhere as well. And so she took longer to get ready, and so she said, hey, can you just go and, help Sophie get dressed, get her shoes on, and then start making breakfast. And then, kind of after we eat breakfast, I can go shower and this and that. Well, I walk into the room, and of course I'm thinking about myself. I'm like, I really don't have time for this. I need to go shower and like be at work right now. And so I go in there, and I'm just like, Sophie is an obstacle. Like basically, I need to get this done as quickly as possible, and so I can get on to what I need to do. And as soon as I walk in the room, she sees me, she just falls on her bed in her crib and just starts crying. And even the way I talk to her is like, Sophie, we need to get ready. Don't have time for this. Help Daddy out, and just kept on. It was just trouncing through the worst morning, like the worst 30 minutes of my life ever. And so I finally learned this I-thou perspective and a different way to see folks, a different way to treat them, and even this thing of what's going on in this other person's world, what's happening with them, and how can I interact with them in such a way to acknowledge that and to respect that. And so exact same situation happened probably a month after I learned this. And so before I even opened the door, I thought to myself, how is this for Sophie? She's used to Missy getting her almost every morning. She loves Daddy and hanging out with Daddy, but when Daddy's just kind of barking orders, she doesn't like that. I don't like that,
Yeah.
And so I go in there, and as soon as I open the door, she just kind of lays down on the bed and like, I want Mommy, and crying. And so I very calmly sat down in front of her crib, kind of just waiting for her to settle down a little bit. And I talked very, very calmly. And I said, Sophie, I could see how this is a little strange for you. Mommy usually gets you, and this morning it's Daddy. But Mommy needs to get ready for something that she's going to. And so I'm going to, if you're okay with it, I'm going to help you get dressed, and then we could get breakfast. I said, but I'm just going to wait until you're ready. And I'll tell you what, it was like that. She got up and stopped crying altogether. The morning was so peaceful and great, and I even connected with her in a way that was good, that we were on the same page, enjoyed our time together, and I wasn't seeing it as like, all right, this is just one step I've got to get through to get to work, which is really most important to me. And I think our lives are like that in a lot of ways. Even as we're thinking about being pastors or being the church, and I always tell people this, I hope I don't sound like a broken record, but it's like ministry can happen wherever you're at. I mean, you can meet someone in Walmart, and we were visiting with a college friend today, and we were talking about how once you get 30, it's really hard to make friends and have that whole discussion, and how, we interact with each other in certain venues or with certain things that we're comfortable with, but when it's outside that, how is it? And I'm just kind of an anomaly. Missy said jokingly, but it's true, she's like, basically the world is Jonathan's kingdom. And I was like, that is true. Like, for whatever reason, God's created me in such a way and has gifted me to connect with people wherever I'm at. And it's weird and awkward, but it's one of those things. I think it's when we realize that we can experience life and enjoy our relationships with other people rather than being a waste of time. It enhances our life so much. And that's what I love about understanding this perspective and living out in our lives.
So, Bevel, the world isn't your kingdom, it's your parish.
I know.
Yeah.
The world is God's kingdom, let's be honest. What stories y'all have?
Well, can I piggyback on that for a second?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of my story, is that I am learning to value, to be present in the moment. Because if we continually think towards the next thing, we are not valuing the time that we have in that moment. It becomes about me if I'm thinking about the next thing, where instead of thinking, whether this is as a parent when I'm hanging out with my kids, is my phone in my hand and I'm thinking about work, or I'm thinking about meeting with another person in a couple of weeks, or I'm thinking about my sermon. Now, we are multitasking people, but do I value my sons enough that I am spending that quality time with them and listening to them fully? Or am I thinking them as something that's gonna... I do this all the time, and I'm learning, and we've talked about this on the podcast, that if I'm present in that moment, I'm valuing that time, not only for them, but I'm learning from them as well. And that I see the value of them as God's children, as my children, as ways in which that person, whoever it may be, my kids or in a ministry setting, that they are valuable, and that they're not just a stepping stone to the next thing that I need to do. And that happens a lot, whether it's in ministry, because we think about our schedules, or we think about our home lives with our kids and our spouses. And it's a continual learning process with me to be present in the moment.
Wow. Matt, I really, this is correct, I really appreciate that insight and that comment. Martin Buber has a comment where he says, it has always lived in the past.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'd be fair to say, are the future. Thou is in the present.
Yeah.
Being where we are. What I believe too is that we're only as influential to another as we are open to be influenced by the other.
Oh yeah, that's great.
And you think about that in relationship to our families.
Mm-hmm.
Are we the ones with the answers, and they need to sit down, be quiet, and listen? Is it really a conversation? Kind of as you said, Jonathan, put on your friend hat.
Yeah.
Walk alongside. Our children can teach us as much as we can teach them. So what does it mean to have that space to really be present with another? Buber tells the story of when he was teaching at a university, or he did a lecture at a university setting, and when he finished and went back to the tradition was that the students would come by and visit with him, and they would play academic ping pong with some of his ideas, and he said they'd come in, sit down, and he would greet them and say thank you and back and forth. And he said one student came in and did that. They exchanged back and forth. This is very paraphrased, but he said the student got up and left, and he said, I treated him like all other students and all. While I welcomed him, I wasn't that present with him, but that's what we do. And he said, only to find out later that day that young man had lost or taken his life.
Hmm.
And it really haunted Boober that I think that had he been more present with this young person, instead of just hearing the words he was speaking, he might could have heard the questions that were really wrestling with his soul that he was living. And how might that have affected the way he responded, more so than responded, but the way he was with the other?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's pretty profound, the way we connect with our families.
I don't know about y'all, but like, there are so many light bulbs going off in my head of just
Yeah.
the implications of this and
Yeah.
how I mean, just how this can really transform not only our lives and the others, but just, you know, as a pastor even, what would it look like to live this way with people no matter where we're at? And even, you know, there are tons of issues with the church right now, and where we're at and where we're headed. And I just think of, you know, do we sometimes see our parishioners as what's the next thing they need to do?
Mm.
Yeah.
What are they going to do to further the kingdom of God, rather than what can I learn from them in my own ministry? And forget the ministry, what can I learn from them about my own life?
Right. Or just view people as, what do they need from me now?
Yeah.
What's the next thing that person needs?
Well, and it makes sense that, you know, if we're treating them that way, then they're just going to treat us again like kind of like, oh, as a pastor, what the heck does he want, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And something I learned, Craig, that you said that stuck with me on both sides of this is that I-itness breeds I-itness.
Mm.
And so if I treat someone like an object, like an obstacle, then they're going to just treat me back that same way. And we've kind of said this in a different way already, and the thing I love is I-thou-ness breeds I-thou-ness. And another implication I think of is just the cycle of violence. You know, it's so amazing to hear stories and to see in our own lives people that have a propensity towards evil or just hatred or whatever it be, or even violence. How disarmed they become when someone interacts with them in such a way that is opposite to what they've experienced and what they're living out in their own lives. And really, it transforms who they are as well. It's like they have to wrestle with, whoa, it's sort of like the comment Jay Roddy makes, you know, how are things in your world? It causes you to kind of have this disequilibrium and to be like, I kind of want to respond here because this is not what I'm used to.
Yeah. I've kind of got a story about this. There's a coworker that I work with that I just have periodic conflicts with. I mean, it just feels like every once in a while we just bump up and bump heads. And the most recent time that we were doing it, I mean, it was real bad. We were talking about something that had to do with our worship service, and I just like thought he had a bad attitude. He thought I had a bad attitude. And I went to our senior pastor and I was like, I don't want to work with this guy anymore. I just don't want to do it. And that weekend, so that happened on like a Thursday. On Sunday, I think, I had an assignment due for my mentored ministry class where I had to read The Anatomy of Peace, the book I was telling you about earlier, which is where these people took Buber's ideas and kind of worked them out in a little more contemporary way. But I mean, the whole thing is based on Martin Buber, and I was reading that book and I was like, crap, why did I have to read this book? Like, why can't I just continue being angry? Why can't I continue with my I-it orientation? Because I mean, this person was just being a roadblock for me, and so like just by like, and so I read that on Friday, I think. Friday night, I was out on a date night with my wife, and we went to the same Mexican restaurant this guy and his wife, and I was like, shoot, I know what I have to do. And I had to go over there and like start treating him like a person, treating him like, because, and what you said about anxiety, Craig, I mean, and Matt, it was so true, because he had a lot of anxiety going on at that time. I had some anxiety going on at that time, and we were just I-ing each other, and so I was able to go to him and say, I just said, listen, man, I've been a real jackass to you, and I'm sorry, and I still think you're wrong, but that's no excuse for me to treat you the way that I've been treating you. And so we were, and that was the step toward us working it out and moving past that incident. I'm sure we'll have more incidents in the future. I mean, it's just kind of the way our relationship is. But I think the more I can keep an I-thou orientation to him, the smoother that stuff's going to go.
And to me, the challenge, the real kicker of this stuff, for me, is severalfold. One is it's easy to be in an I-thou way with people who are that way towards me.
Sure.
But the real kicker, that's what Jesus is dealing with when he says loving our enemies, is how do we stay in an I-thou way towards those who are in an I-it way towards me?
Right.
That's the kicker. And Buber had a quote that says something like this, very paraphrased: our I-thou relationship to God and our I-thou relationship to our fellow human being are one and the same. Which is kind of that old teaching that says, when we stand before God, is the question going to be, where's your neighbor?
Wow. Whatever you've
Martin
done,
Buber.
whatever you've done to the least of these, you've
That's
done
right.
I know Alice Walker has a phrase that sometimes in our theological circle we would do well to remember. She says, let us not forget about human beings in all of our high talk of God.
Yep.
And I think that some of that need to acknowledge the value, the dignity, the honor, and the worth of people, because they're people, because they're made in the image of God. It doesn't mean we have to agree with them, but how can we create a way of disagreeing while still staying in connection and relationship? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and it's not just talking about it. I think that's our problem. We can talk about it all we want, but in the actual living out is the kicker, right? We can talk about all we want. We can talk about loving our neighbor and serving the poor and doing that, but if we don't do it, right, we don't value the other person. We can talk about it. We can read a book. We can share it. But if we don't live it out, we're not being authentic, if you will.
That's great.
A lot to think about.
Yeah.
These little pauses that you keep hearing, that's just the sound of the mic dropping over and over.
Well,
and it's kind of, I think as a church, and I know we're talking about families, but these are just kind of nested with each other, I believe. But as a church, once again, when we put the institution before the people we're called to serve, is it not shifted? Does it shift from an out to an I-it? They're here to serve the institution versus the institution is here to minister to the people. That's I asked this question. One question I heard someone say to me once, and it was a good one. When I'm working with my children, even getting ready I want to discipline them. The question I'm asking is, there's two questions I'm asking myself. First of all, am I doing this to help them, or am I doing this to help me?
That's a great question. In all the hats that we wear, right? Am I going into a counseling session and going to talk more about me than listen? Am I going to sit down with my family and discipline? I love that. Discipline our kids. Are we doing this because I want to have peace and quiet to work on something? Or am I serving this so that they can learn and better themselves? Specifically in the fact of like instructing kids, right? Like Bevel's example of dressing his daughter, right? In the morning, are we doing things to serve our own purposes, or are we doing it with their things in mind?
And that's something that speaking about anxiety, I have some social anxiety, and when I'm out and I'm expected to mingle around, or even just when I'm around people I don't know real well, my inner monologue is all going about, am I doing what's expected of me? Am I fulfilling my role? Am I meeting expectations? And that's bad in a couple of ways. The first of ways is that I'm not being my authentic self, because I'm being the self that's trying to match expectations. But the other thing is that it's a fundamentally selfish way to go through the world. Yeah. Because I'm not thinking about those other people. I'm spending the whole time thinking about myself and how I can match those people's expectations. It's a comfort thing for myself. And so when I find myself doing that, I just have to say, it's not about you, Matt. You are here for the other person. How am I helping the other people that are here? Not how am I leveraging their opinion of me to make myself feel better. And and that exists in myself as anxiety, but it's really just selfishness.
Yeah.
I would be remiss not to mention this, and maybe it's because we went to this conference and it was about church planning and change the world. But this understanding has messed me up in a good, in the best way. So as we were talking about church planning and multiplication and making disciples, it's interesting because there are people that approach this on two different sides. I think overall there's huge anxiety in the church of, we need to make disciples, we need to make disciples. We're declining. And so instead of actually focusing on seeing people as people and seeing that we want to have a relationship with them, one, and we want to introduce them to Jesus, we're seeing them more as, how do we get these people in our church to count numbers? How do we make these people, make them disciples, but just to get that monkey off our back and say, oh, gosh, at least we stopped the bleeding, at least we plugged this hole. Yeah. And I'll say this, I really believe that we need to stop worrying so much about it, trust in the Lord Jesus Christ and the power of the Holy Spirit, and interact with people in such a way that we truly are concerned to help them out, whether they understand it or not. I think it was, I don't know if it was Shane Claiborne or somebody this week, but they said, we need to interact with people in such a way that they come to know that they want Jesus. They don't know right now that they want Jesus, but we're going to interact with them so that they know that. And on the other hand, I think there is kind of, on those that have had success in multiplication and growing the church, and maybe I'm wrong on this, maybe they see it differently, but there does seem to be this mentality, and someone named it, it's sort of like, it just sounds like we need to do this, this, and this to grow. And I struggle with that because the kingdom perspective, from the way I see it, and I could be wrong, I'm open to what y'all have to say or what anyone else in the community would like to say, is something that starts off really, really slow. And it does value, and it does start off with individual people and taking them seriously enough, stopping like Jesus did so much. We read in the Gospels of him taking people seriously. The woman who reached out for touching the hem of his clothing, taking those people seriously and interacting with them in such a way that God's able to heal them. God's able, through us, people know that God loves them more in the way in which we interact with them. And so I do believe that the kingdom is going to multiply and that God's going to break into the world more, but it does require that us just take people seriously like Jesus did and how God does. And even one last thing, and I'll shut up. I was flying this week back and forth. We took a private plane, and something about that just made me think about different things. Talked about boundaries last week, and so I thought it was interesting how there are many different boundaries above of like either roads or waters or this or that. Another thing that I thought about was just how oh man, I totally forgot it. Brain fart. Go ahead. It was something profound. Might have to.
Think about it. Going back to the growth thing, and I think a lot of it comes even in the ways we talk about evangelism, right? You hear talk about how many souls you won, And when we start to view people as souls to be one, we're not viewing them with an I-thou perspective. That's an I-it perspective of people. Because a person is more than a soul. You're more than your eternal destination. And I think it does us a disservice when we go about evangelism trying to convert souls rather than trying to help and love people. But Bevel, to your point about churches that are really growing, I think the churches that succeed in growth the most are the ones that are able to train their lay people to have an I-thou perspective and to love those people on an individual level. Because I'm never going to be able, as a pastor, to love, 1,000 people on an individual level. Yeah. But if I can, and Jesus didn't, in his physical form, he loved as many people as he could, but he trained the 12 disciples to love and then to go out and do that, and they're the ones that accomplish all that growth. And so I think what the trick is to keep that individual mentality of we have to love individuals, we have to have the I-thou mentality towards individuals, but we also have to train those under us to do the same thing too. And so that, and I think that's where the multiplication growth happens, is when I don't have to love you necessarily myself because I've trained all these other people to do it too. And the kind of love that you're getting from them makes my love unnecessary. And if I encounter you in that way, then I'll love you that way. But we've grown so much that all these other people are doing that love too. Manderson.
Can I respond to that? Really?
Yes. Go ahead.
A couple of things here I would respond on it. And one of these, I'm going to use it as a church leader to trace it back to the family. The first one is, to me, I talk about growth, church growth, really as a byproduct of effective relationships. It's not the goal. If it's the goal, unfortunately, the people, it's so easy for them to become the objects.
Right.
Versus the byproduct of effective ministry. The other side is, let me be clear that we understand that just because I function as a pastor out of an I-thou way, it doesn't mean everything's going to go great and we're going to be a mega church.
Oh, sure.
Because Jesus was most parallel, the one who practiced I-thou, he's the one that models it, and he got crucified. So I think it's fair to say, just because we do it in an I-thou way that we're going to be successful, that's not why we do it. We do it because we're called to minister to people. And as pastors, we're going to run into some rough times, either now or later in ministry. We're going to run into that church or that person in the church. That's part of the journey that we can learn and grow from and through. But I also think that that happened. But if I'm going to get in that rough time, if I'm going to get crucified, so to speak, using it very metaphorical in life, is at least I want to be able to get up the next morning and look at myself in the mirror and say, I held my own integrity. I can live with myself whether they would accept it or not. The last statement is this. This is the one I want to trace back. One of the things we like to say in systems is, if leaders can stay calm and non-anxious, and we're not talking about behavior, we're talking about presence, way of the heart, way of the soul, way of being. If we can stay in a calm, non-anxious way, it has a salutary effect on the systems with which we connect and with whom we connect. So what that means is salutary effect. When we're calm as leaders, they stay calmer. When they stay calmer, there's greater capacity for I-thou. The same is in our congregations, the same is also in our families. So what does it look like for us as parents to maintain a kind of calm or less anxious presence? And how do I recognize when I'm not maintaining that? And how do I where there's peace in my soul? And I think that's a great question, though, how to honor that part of me and invite it out and live out of that space. And what do I need to do, practices to help that happen? So I just think that's an important question to put out there, or thought.
Absolutely.
I'll say one other thing, and it seems like we need to wrap up here, but I remember what I was going to say is that, seeing people as small ants, and I was telling Missy today, seeing people drive on the interstate, which looks so slow at my perspective. I had the thought of, it really is amazing that God, that created all things, things we see and things we don't, wants to have a very present, very up-close relationship with each creature that he's created. And that still blows me away. On the other hand, I think maybe something we run into as Christian leaders is maybe this unspoken expectation that we do need to, love everyone as though we're their best friend, or that, we go deep and this and that. And we've talked about this before, the Searching to Belong book, that we connect in different ways with people. But I think it is right, the model of Jesus, that we need to live in an I-thou way with the 3 and the 12, and to teach them to do that. And really, it is amazing to see almost like the system is down, like to see that the system can function in a way that is so much more messy looking on the outside, but when it comes to the heart, it is a beautiful thing. And we've said that before. I love how family life is messy and church work is messy, and I mean, our lives are messy if we're honest. But when we live in an I-thou perspective, it's amazing to see and experience that life. Any other last words y'all would have about this, or maybe what you're thinking on?
I'm just going to keep thinking on it for a long time. Yeah. I'm probably going to go back and listen to this episode like once a week from now on.
Well, I hung out with a colleague this week, and she taught me how to breathe right, and so I think maybe on a count of 3, we could all just breathe in and breathe out, a sigh of relief. 1, 2, 3. Well, we're going to keep processing this more and more. Craig, thanks so much. What a great conversation. We're going to kick into our recurring segment, which is
Let's go straight to wins.
Okay.
You want to?
Yeah,
I mean,
that sounds good.
Yeah.
It is quite long.
Yeah.
We're going to kick into our parenting win segment. So I'll go ahead and share. Again, I was gone all week, and last weekend I really tried Sabbathing on Saturday. And so I built a fire and just kind of hung outside and read some, talked to my wife. And Sophie came up, and she wanted to play with me. And so I'm not going to lie. Whenever she says, hey, Daddy, let's play, I'm kind of like, oh, my goodness, not again. Because she always has an expectation that I play in a certain way, that I do things a certain way. Whenever I do something that I just want to do to play, like actually play and be, ourselves, she's like, no, Daddy, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And so I was just kind of like, yes, I'll play with you, darling. And I was just very patient and just said, let me just go with this, see what her imagination is going to come up with. And so she had a stick, and she's like, let's play sword fight over here and do it this certain way. And so I was like, sure. She gave me the shortest curly stick. I was like, I'm going to get injured here. But we had fun, and I was able to convince her. Like I said, I accidentally dropped my stick in the fire, and she's like, that's fine, I'll pick you out a new sword. And so I went through like 2 or 3 different swords, and it was just a blast. It was fun. I think I even saved one of the swords I found, and she liked it, and so we'll have to sword fight again. What about y'all?
I had this thing last night where Ruthie wanted something. I don't remember what she wanted, but she started to whine about it. And I guess I just had this I-thou stuff in my mind, because generally I'm like, just stop whining. Whining is not how you get what you want. And I kind of chastise her for whining. But this time, I decided to have fun with her. So, she had this like obvious like fake cry going on. And I was like, Ruthie, I'll let you get what you want if you can look a little bit sadder for me. And she like contorted her face, trying to look even sadder. And I was like, I want real tears. Show me some real tears. And then, like, by the end of that, she was just like laughing. She couldn't like look sad anymore through her laughter. And then Olivia was there too, and I was like, Olivia, let me see you look sad. And she was doing it. And then it just like devolved into this game where we're making silly faces and like saying okay, now make angry faces. And we all showed our angry faces, and then we like made silly faces, and it just like went from this conflict into this silly game that we played. So I felt like that was a win, where it shut down the whining, but it also just a moment of connection for us. So I enjoyed that time. I felt like a really proud parent then.
Well, I was gone again all last week, like I shared before, and but like Bevel, the Saturday before, we just sort of, it's been, Northeast Ohio can be fickle. Like right now, it's probably like 40 degrees outside, but last weekend it was like 75 and sunny, and so we were outside all day. You know, I mowed the grass. We played outside. Justice has a Little Tykes four-wheeler, and he was outside, and we closed the night with a bonfire and some s'mores, and it was just relaxing and beautiful. So it was a wonderful time, and I think anytime that I was present in that moment, which is always something I'm working, with, and it worked out really well, and it was just a beautiful Saturday and a beautiful time with the family.
Nice.
Well, I'm gonna throw an audible here, Craig. As I was thinking about this, you're in a different situation than we are. Your kids are out of the house. Perhaps what's the most profound way in which you've connected with your sons?
What a question. I always tried to focus or emphasize to my sons the best I could that they really were them, and both my sons and my spouse were I will say God and them were centers of my life. And I tried to function from that place most of the time. Not long ago, and I'm going to use this as two parts. Not long ago, I published a poetry book. It's called Where Wild Things Grow. And it's on Amazon. I've just got to make that note for you.
We'll share it.
In writing that book, it's the first book of poetry, and it's in writing that book, one of the reasons I wrote it was that I had one part of my life that was ministry. I have another part of my life that was poetry, but the two didn't merge. They were two separate worlds. And really, I began to wrestle with that whole question of why am I keeping my art and artistry apart from my ministry? So I put them together, and part of the reason I did that is because when I looked around the room, I had poetry everywhere, on napkins and cupboards in the back of books. But then what happened is I realized that if I were to die today, that's a part of me my sons would never know. So I pulled all these poems together and published them in a single document. And I tell you what, there was not a greater joy than when I went and saw each one of them, both of them face to face, and my wife, and gave them a handheld copy of that book. Because in the front of the book, on the front page, what it says is this book is dedicated to my wife and my two sons, and lists their names. And it didn't matter if I sold another book. The fact that I was able to say, I love you and thank you, and to say that publicly, made the whole book worth the journey.
That's amazing. I think that's a question we've come to before on, at the end of our life, what impact do we want to have on our kids? I think that's what drives me, at least, to be a part of this community and hopefully become better as a person and parent and husband, pastor. Thanks for sharing that, Craig. Well, Craig, thanks for the conversation. It's been great. It's always a pleasure to visit with you. We'll certainly throw up a link in the show notes to your book, and people can find you on justpeaceumc.org, and then I'm sure you're on Facebook and Twitter and whatnot. So thanks so much, y'all. Let's keep the conversation going. You can find us at parentpastor.com. We got show notes on there. You can email us. We're also on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. We've got a group. Just ask to join. It's called the Parent Pastor Podcast Group. Love to have you. And We didn't have anybody this week, but if you'd like to share your own parenting fails and wins, please just call 484-2PARENT. We would love to learn from you and love to just maybe share it in what God's doing in your life with your family and with your kids. Help us out, please. iTunes has this thing where if you're not subscribed, then more people can't find out about this great community we have. So please just go subscribe. You might listen elsewhere. And leave a review. We'd love to share that on the show with other people. Next week, we are really excited. We're having Drew Causey from the Threshing Floor podcast with us, and we're going to discuss foster care and adoption with him. So please join us. I hope you have a great week. No other words but PP.
PP!
PP, gentlemen. PP.